Our next speaker is an amazing clinical psychiatrist, Dr. Samantha Boardman. Come on up. We're going to talk all things happiness.
Thank you.
So you already had a private practice. You're practicing. You've got people coming in, but you decided to go back and get a degree in positive psychology at UPenn. Why?
Well, it happened in a sort of roundabout way, and it really started with me getting fired. It felt terrible in the moment because I'd been seeing a patient, a young woman who had been coming to see me because she was really overwhelmed with stress, and she was having difficulty with her relationship and with her husband, and so I thought, I'm going to give her medication. She seems depressed, and I'll have her come and see me for a few weeks. So we had about 5 sessions, and I thought we were making great progress, and I was giving her ways to sort of dial down the stress, and she said to me, "You know what, Dr. Boardman, I hate coming here. All you do is make me feel worse. You talk about everything that's wrong in my life, and I'm done with it." And I never saw her again. And it was a wake-up call for me that maybe I was just sort of looking very narrowly at sort of one sort of aspect of mental health, and trying to make her less miserable had nothing to do with helping her thrive.
Yep. And so why positive psychology? And back to school, too.
It was really hard, but it represented everything, the opposite of everything I'd learned in medical school. It was all about sort of focusing on people's strengths,
Yep.
helping them cultivate wellness. And in medicine, when you see a patient, you always want to get them back to baseline. What's their
Yep.
baseline? And get them back there. And positive psychology is more sort of about helping them move beyond their baseline and helping them sort of see and capitalize on their potential and recognize their capacity and work with their strengths. So it was an eye-opening experience, and now I sort of work with both and see how they can cross-pollinate traditional psychiatry and psychology.
So when you speak baseline, I think happiness. So happiness is the term we throw around a lot. We think we have it, we want more of it, we don't have it. How do you define happiness?
Well, first of all, I think we've sort of been sold a bag of goods about happiness. It's this thing like everyone says, happiness comes from within. Or people come to see me and they say, "Dr. Boardman, I just want to be happy." And
so what does that mean?
It really means, that they're sort of focused and they think they've got to do this deep dive inward into self-discovery. But what's become increasingly apparent, and research backs this up, is happiness doesn't come from within. It comes from with. Like doing things with others, doing something in the service of something larger than oneself. And it's almost a byproduct of having sort of meaning and a sense of purpose in one's life, rather than just sort of moment-to-moment joy, which is super important, but it's not necessarily, I think, how people looking back will define a good life.
So more emotional connection, less
Absolutely.
going out to the woods and hanging out in the cabin and meditating for 60 days.
But that's connecting you, absolutely. Yep. That is something.
Okay. So what about optimism? Does optimism play a role?
Well, optimism is essential, and it really goes hand in hand with resilience.
Yep.
How do we build resilience? And it's not Pollyanna-style optimism, like, "Oh, gee whiz, I'm so happy my patient fired me, that's great." But it's more of a realistic kind of optimism.
Sure.
What does that look like? So it's actually understanding the difficulty, the adversity you're facing, but also being optimistic about what's going on. So Martin Seligman from University of Pennsylvania says people who are pessimistic when something bad happens to them, they think of the 3 Ps. They take it really personally, they think of it as permanent, and they think of it as pervasive. And how can you, if you're missing the subway as it's pulling, as you're getting down there and it pulls away, you can be like, "This always happens to me, it's always gonna happen to me, I'm gonna have a bad day." Or if you can sort of get rid of those 3 Ps, you can be more realistically optimistic. And it's not just about sort of thinking positively, because thinking positively can really take us in the wrong direction. In the moment, it can feel really good.
Do you want to talk about the Stockdale paradox?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
From great to good. He, Admiral Stockdale was the highest-ranking officer who was incarcerated in Vietnam, and he was there, under very difficult times. They broke his pelvis, they broke his knees, and throughout his ordeal, he said what sort of kept him sane was that he was hopeful that he would always see his wife again, and he knew that he could endure the difficulty of what was going on, but he was also hopeful about the future. Whereas those who were with him, who felt that, oh, I'll be out by Christmas, I'll be out by my birthday, they didn't do as well.
Christmas would come, not home.
And how that actually undermines your motivation, and it's really frustrating and upsetting, and you can see how that it really can be linked to depression. So you don't just want to be like a positive thinker. So there's some research right now at NYU looking at how can you be realistically optimistic. So you could like have a goal you have that would be your wish. Then the outcome would be whatever that wish would happen. And then you have to think of the obstacle, like what's in the way of you getting to that wish, and then what's the plan you would have. So we call it WOOP, W-O-O-P. And you can think about your wish, the outcome, the obstacle, and the plan. I think it's a helpful way to be.
So successful people, and two-part question. One is how would you define success in a mind, body, green sort of way? And then what are those traits of successful people? Like, can you spot?
Well, I have a lot of traditionally successful people in
Those
the
are good
older
too.
way, who have everything, but actually feel.
So why are they unhappy?
And well, it's exactly what you say.
I'm assuming they're unhappy if they're going to you.
Well, having everything.
Do you get people who walk in who are just like, I just love life, but I love talking to you?
Yeah, I don't think there'd be anything wrong with that. I've always thought, like, you don't have to be morbidly obese to go to, have a trainer. Like, why couldn't you just go there for a tune-up?
Right.
So my practice is sort of about that. But yeah, most people come at some like inflection point in their lives. Like that's why people come in there. So you have these people who sort of have everything, and then they feel sort of guilty that they don't have a sense of purpose or meaning or really connections is what it comes down to. And the way that I've really been looking at defining happiness more recently is how many other people have you sort of helped promote? How many other people have you helped do well? And that seems to be a more sustainable form of success. I think sort of helping others and yourself.
So what do most people actually come to you for?
Oh, these big inflection points, that in between lives, at these moments where, like in between jobs, relationships, something that brings them in the door that is traumatic in some way. But then when you start talking to them, it becomes pretty clear after like 2 or 3 sessions that it's less that big thing, and it's more the choices they're making every day. Like it's sort of in these micro moments that shape their lives. It's like what choices they're making around food, sleeping, taking care of themselves, spending time with others. Because when people are really stressed out, they tend to withdraw from their friends. They cancel their plans, they don't eat well, and you get this double whammy of stress.
How do you get to the core right away? And do you talk, I'm also curious, like do you talk about things like nutrition and...
I never used to. In medical school, nobody ever told me to focus on nutrition unless somebody had an eating disorder. Nobody told me to focus on sleep unless there was a problem with sleep. Now I definitely do. Sometimes it's what they're not saying, you find, in a session. Sometimes people are trying to entertain you, and I shouldn't be saying this here, but telling tales out of school, but sometimes I'd find when I'm bored in a session that's sort of a wake-up call to like maybe we're really not talking about the thing. And it's sort of a shorthand to, you realize like maybe we need to refocus.
So how do you get to the thing then?
It's digging.
I want to get everyone to be able to diagnose their friends.
That will be successful. It's that dive into, the dive into like sort of, it's not just sort of what brings them in the door, it's how they're handling it. And so sometimes the thing that brings them in the door isn't that thing that they want to talk about, and sometimes you only get there about 6 weeks later or so, but it will emerge in ways, and where I'll often see it in these funny moments with at the boundaries. It's before the session begins or after the session ends that you'll get this little glimpse into who they are. So they might sort of be talking about all this other stuff during the session, but it's sort of on the periphery or at the borders where the magic happens, and you get a window into their character and what's going on in their lives.
Like a little offhand comment at the end, or
Yeah.
Or drop a bomb right when the session's about to end.
Or even you'll hear them on the phone beforehand in the waiting room, sort of barking at somebody, but then they'll be so sort of lovely and polite with you, and you'll sort of get a different sense of who they are. When you say, oh, it's time to end, and they'll be like, wait, I forgot to tell you, I just quit my job today. There's a certain, that's where you get these glimpses of people.
Are there certain times of the year where you're quite popular?
Well, business is always good, but there's definitely, this time of year now, brings people in after the summer, especially in relationships. You'll often find people coming in sort of, should we break up now? We spent the summer together. What's
Right.
going on? Also in January, that's
Most
a
of the
big
time, I'm
issue.
curious, when you get that question, is it usually like 50-50, or is it like usually if someone, I always use this, I say this, like if you have to ask the question, you know the answer. So is it usually like 90% no, or do break up?
50-50. I mean, I don't want to
Okay.
put a number on it, but yeah, I would say like if you're in the door there, but people who, it's really a choice sometimes, if people, you realize, for many of them, it's are they willing to sort of cultivate it? And nobody teaches you this in medical school either, is you don't have to, we taught people in couples therapy how to fight better. And it turns out that that's really not that helpful. If you, well, you're not supposed to say, don't insult her mother. Of course you don't want to insult her mother and like play dirty. But at
Are
the
some
same
relatives like free game, or?
I think it's always helpful to have
Okay.
one like uncle who you can just go at.
So is that like good come to terms, like you have my aunt and I have your cousin,
I think that has to be agreed upon like
Okay.
before it like the argument gets going.
Okay.
But I think it actually is really helpful though to agree on
Okay.
that. But it's more, instead of actually arguing better, which they teach you in medical school, it's how do you celebrate one another? How do you compliment one another? How do you listen to one another? So it's a very different approach, a much more positive psychology
So
approach.
can you give us an example? What's the right way to compliment your partner, and the wrong way?
It's someone's like, do I look good in this? You mean, or that sort of when
Yep.
you're going out the door, it's really giving them your full attention.
Yep.
Is all it comes down to. If they say to you, hey, did you see that article in the newspaper? It's not looking down at your phone and being like, yeah, what? Where are we having dinner?
Right.
It's actually, no, tell me about it.
Yep.
3 words, tell me more. Is that would be, it doesn't have to be a compliment, it's just really more of attention.
And so something I think everyone is interested in here is aging, and people who age well, people who live long, healthy, happy lives. What are the qualities you see in those people?
Well, the really good news, there's all this research coming out of San Diego that we're all like fine wines. Like we actually are getting better with age, and life satisfaction increases as we get older. And I think we have this sort of grumpy old man, myth about aging, but most of us do get better. We're more patient, we're calmer, we sort of know what we like, we know what we don't like, and so most people do get happier, even in the face of some cognitive disabilities or even physical ones. But the key is relationships.
Really?
Having people who you love and who love you and you connect with is essential to healthy aging. And having a sense of purpose, a reason to wake up in the morning. So it's something we wish we could prescribe, is purpose. And looking at studies of people who are geriatrics who have been asked to help high school seniors get into college, and actually the high school seniors, they did their job. They were able to get into college with their help, but 80% of them said that their life improved of the geriatric people who participated because they had a reason to wake up in the morning.
So what do you say to people who are struggling finding a purpose? They walk in and they're stuck in a job, or they're just stuck and they're like, I don't know, like help me find it. What do you say to that person?
I think a lot of it's about like kind of connecting to your core values.
Yep.
Like what means the most to you? And an exercise I often ask them to do is sort of list 3 things. Like what means the most to you? Like what do you care about the most? And learning, being
Curious.
whatever those things. So how do you spend your free time? And well, on weekends I sort of fall into a Game of Thrones hole, or like do I sort of
I
hang
wouldn't
out?
have pegged you for that.
no, but not me.
Now I'm analyzing you. No.
Oh no, everyone's going to be an analyst here. And but so actually, how do you walk the walk? How do you spend your
Right.
time? And I think when there is more overlap between how you spend your time and what you value most, and actually you can even job craft. If you're at a job that seems really boring, like what in that job that you do can connect to your values? If you like to help others, how can you maybe within your job could you do that? And so I think there's a lot of responsibility that you can take to help you sort of reconnect with your purpose.
How important is sleep?
Gosh, it's essential, and nobody told me that. When I was in medical school, we wore these like circles under our eyes like badges of honor, and I didn't trust people who looked well rested. It was really, there
Do
was
you
one
trust people
girl.
here?
Everyone looks really well here, but I've turned the corner, and I just read a new sleep study saying how we're actually less good at when we're exhausted, even sleeping less than 7 hours a night. That whole "I'll sleep when I'm dead" attitude. is not working for any of us. And even those who say, I don't need sleep, they do. And it's usually the people around them who realize it. But even we're less able to, well, they're the ones, they're the check engine light, that they know when somebody's sleep deprived. And we're irritable, we're angry, and it really affects, our physical health, but our mental health and our ability to concentrate. It's linked to ADHD, and our ability to read facial cues, which is really interesting when you're sleep deprived, that you're not able to sort of register necessarily what somebody else is, the way you could read their face when you were well rested.
So we have a lot of people traveling today. What about sleep and travel?
Always tough, and especially when there's a lot of activities. And there's fascinating research that we're all sort of like whales or dolphins when we travel and we spend a night in a new hotel or a new environment, is that we basically sleep with one eye open. So we're just like these birds when they do it, and half of our brain stays awake in an unfamiliar environment. And it seems like a sort of hangover from evolution, that we're a little bit more alert in a new environment, and it's why you're probably like a little bit groggier whenever you spend the night in a new hotel or somewhere that's unfamiliar.
Second night better.
Second night's always better, yeah. It's a reason they say like bring your pillow with you, like bring something familiar there so you have something that is more comforting. But
not your iPhone next to you.
Do you know 92% of 18 to 29-year-olds sleep with their phone on or in their bed? And I think it was like 94% if they wake up in the middle of the night, they go and check it.
What's the long-term effect there?
We don't know. We know it's affecting people's sleep. And there was, I think, 3 out of 5 said they'd rather give up sex than their phone. So that was shocking to me. But there you have it. So there's one rule, I always think, if there's one thing you can do or one intervention is get your phone out of your bedroom and plug it in the kitchen, just don't have it in your bedroom.
Has that been a solution for some of your patients who've come in?
Well, yes, and always the first response is, but it's my alarm clock. That's okay, go buy an old-fashioned alarm clock.
So switching gears, one thing that's always popular on My Muddy Green for some reason is the idea of sociopaths and psychopaths. How do you spot them? How do you deal with them? How do you love them? They're out there.
Oh, they're out there, and they're so charming. One of the red flags is, oh my gosh, I just met the most dreamy sort of person, because they are so unbelievably charming and seductive. Run. And so there is, it sort of sometimes we'll be like, oh, that guy? No, he's really, somebody else will have some information about them. But the seduction is really scary. And we have this overlap too, and everyone's talking a lot about narcissists these days, in toxic narcissism too. The best question you could ever ask a narcissist, and the most reliable indicator if they are or not a narcissist, is, are you a narcissist? And it's astonishing that I think like 90% of them will say yes.
Really?
Yeah, it's something they're not really afraid of. A sociopath's harder to spot. I mean,
how do you spot? What are the?
It's truly, it's a lack of, by definition, of empathy.
Okay.
They're really sort of, when no one's looking, they're looking at for number one, and they can actually play different roles extremely well and morph into charming, lovely sort of people, but when no one's looking, or they think no one's looking, you sort of can get this other glimpse of them. But that's something, it's a diagnosis you can only make over time. You really can't do it in the moment.
And what about psychopaths?
It's the same thing.
Same thing, socio-psycho.
Yeah.
And can you do anything to help? What do you do?
Well, that's the question.
Right.
I mean, can you, traditional thinking is no, you can't. There's nothing you can do because they lack empathy and there's really no way to rehabilitate them. I would optimistically or realistically like to believe that, that there is potential for some people to change.
So we're going to close the last question. So when we chatted, you have this great little story about Bruce Springsteen.
Oh,
but it's not what you think.
Story. No. Well, we're talking a lot about sort of mindsets and how you think about stress and how it can really affect you. So that it was this one patient who had come talking about how he'd been promoted at work, and he was now having to speak in front of a large group of people every Monday morning, and it would give him tremendous stress and anxiety, and he would have a full-blown panic attack beforehand. He said, it's just awful. I can't breathe. My heart's racing. These beads of sweat are on my forehead. My hands are all clammy. My knees are about to sort of collapse. In my stomach, I just feel like I'm going to throw up. And one day he was watching Bruce Springsteen on Jay Leno, and who asked him, "Oh, Jay, wow, you know," Jay said to Bruce, "Wow, you're amazing. What does it feel like when you're about to get on stage, you know, in front of 20,000 people? Tell me, how does it feel?" And Bruce answers, "Wow, it's the most incredible feeling. You know, my heart starts racing, and I feel like I can't breathe, and my palms get all sweaty, and my knees get weak, and I get these butterflies in my stomach. And it's my body telling me I'm ready to rock." So it's just amazing how physiologically, you know, it's the interpretation
Right.
of these symptoms that are identical, and yet, you know, one sees it as energy and excitement, and one sees it as fear.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dr. Samantha Boardman. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was so much fun.
You were great.
Thank you. I love that.
Thank you. Thank you, Samantha.